first of all, to be very honest, I know that we younger people on the train, and I'm sure a lot of the older people were disappointed that it wasn't President Kennedy. But then he had been assassinated, of course, the 5 months earlier. So we had President Johnson, and being little folks from Montana, of course we were thrilled to see the President of the United States accompanied by our wonderful Mike Mansfield. But the thrill wasn't quite there as we had hoped it would be with Kennedy, but it was certainly an honor for all we Montanans to be invited into the Rose Garden and being given welcoming speeches, etc.
Do you recall what LBJ said that day to you?
No, Dennis, I really don't. You know, that was 25 years ago. I know that we presented him with a beautiful Charlie Russell print, and I'm sure it was one of their, in general, welcoming speech to all these local yokels from Montana, but I really can't recall. I remember him giving a nice welcoming speech also at the dinner that evening, but I can't remember all the words. They had us running and going to so many cities and towns and banquets that I'm ashamed to say I don't remember really exactly what he did say. I'm sure it was inspiring. The truth wasn't told, but it was a great publicity stunt for Montana. And the real thing that happened, actually, Dennis, was that here we had the full, 950 people at this huge banquet in Washington, D.C. And just at the time that I was singing and doing my routine, which was Annie, Get Your Gun, in one certain spot, then I blew off this Bisley Colt with the finest blanks in it you've ever heard. But just as I was to shoot the gun, they were announcing clear on the other side of this huge banquet hall, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States. And as they were saying that, I blew my gun off. And that was so, right after Kennedy, that it hit the newspapers that, I was grabbed by the Secret Service, and this is the kind of news that came back to Montana, my grandmother being ashamed that I was unladylike shooting my gun. But the fact of the matter is, no Secret Servicemen came near me, and mind you, they all did gather around Johnson in one way of a hurry, but I was clear across the room, and they must have just known it was a wild Irishman from Montana, and they ignored it. I don't know. But Montana usurped a lot of good publicity out of that.
New York City was the 10th stop. The train cars wouldn't fit through the underwater tunnels and had to be ferried onto Long Island, where they were then parked at the pavilion site on the fairgrounds. At the banquet, mixing with the likes of Montana's Myrna Loy, Governor Babcock called the evening the state's finest hour. Norma Beatty was in charge of arrangements.
First of all, we had Julian Hayes, who was with the Anaconda Company in New York City. He's originally from Butte, and he said he'd head up a little committee in New York of displaced Montanans. And with his clout with the Anaconda Company, that didn't hurt at all. And he assigned one of his staff to do a lot of the details for us. But we had to arrange, like, for all of the food, and Jack Hume from Bozeman was able to arrange for Montana beef to be shipped all the way from Montana back to New York for that particular dinner. And it was an enormous undertaking, but we had tremendous cooperation. We had lots and lots of products and services donated, which made it all possible. And I guess it was kind of a dream come true when that night we were there with 800 people in the big grand ballroom of the Commodore Hotel in New York City. Another funny thing about that dinner is that we arranged for Monty Montana to have his horse brought into the ballroom, and it cost us a fortune to bring that horse in from Long Island and then bring it up the elevator of the Commodore Hotel. We had to pay $150 to a carpenter to build a ramp to lead that horse up on the stage. And, but we decided it was worth it. And it was worth it for all those displaced Montanans who were there, and, of course, all the folks on the train that were there to see Monty Montana come. And you can imagine, I'm sure there were a couple other New Yorkers in that elevator, and you can imagine their shock when they got on the elevator and found a horse in the elevator. Probably never before, never again has a horse ever been in a hotel elevator. Another very special memory I have of that event was John Steinbeck, the great writer. And of course, you know his book, Travels with Charlie. And we thought how wonderful it would be if we could get John Steinbeck there as a special guest. So when I was in New York ahead of time for the dinner, I called him up. His name was in the phone book, his phone number's in the phone book. I called him up, introduced myself, told him what my mission was, that we Montanans loved his book and would he like to come as a guest to our dinner. And he was heartbroken that he had a commitment, but he said, I'll tell you what I'll do, I'll write you a personal letter. And he did, in his own hand, write me this gorgeous letter, and we had that reprinted, and everybody there got a copy of this beautiful letter from John Steinbeck.
The following day, just 2 days after the World's Fair opened, was Montana Day. Ott Shockey sat in the driver's seat of the Montana Pavilion for over 2 years. That seat, too, would feel the insatiable thirst for money. The pavilion displayed even more of Montana. New Yorkers were awed by Herefords and inspired by elk. Sally Hereford celebrated a birthday in 1964. Ellie Elk provided a calf in 1965. But even with these unique Montana events, overall fair attendance dropped 30 million persons below projections for the 2 seasons, and Montana suffered proportionately. Still, nearly 380,000 people viewed the museum. 3 million walked on the pavilion grounds.
The amount of coverage that we got from that in all media, newspaper, television, radio, has never been matched by any other promotion. If we were to have to buy that kind of promotion today, it would cost millions and millions. It would take our whole budget. And we got most of that free. And you just can't match that. So it's something that all of us who are involved with are very proud of.
Back in Montana, Governor Babcock sought funds from business and individuals to support the pavilion. The effort succeeded, and all debts were eventually paid with the exception of the loan from the State Fish and Game Department.
Tim, does the issue of the public monies that the state put forth for the train effort become a political liability during your administration?
Well, I don't think so. It seemed to me that there was almost no one that didn't believe that the state got full value plus for this, for the funds they put in. Mm-hmm. And of course the program became much bigger than its original thought. When we started the celebration, the train wasn't even a part of it. As you may recall, the state did appropriate $200,000 for us to launch into a Centennial. And then the idea of the train becoming a part of it was augmented it and gave it, I thought, a lot of character and a reason for a lot of people to belong and to get involved. And it was a kind of a happy time where it seemed like people were willing to get together on the project, and it involved with some history of the state. That was good. Overall, it was just a good, happy, friendly period. And the Centennial train was kind of the climax to a celebration that I think was so meaningful to the state.
The National Cowboy Hall of Fame presented the train with a special Western Heritage Award for its contribution to advertising the American West. All 7 cars of the original train remain in the state, several being used as information centers or retail shops, while others lie abandoned in fields.
I think that there's never been a scheme as grand as the Centennial train scheme is. It was just almost like the Barnum and Bailey Circus, or almost like Buffalo Bill and the things that he did. And I think for all of us who are involved, we, to this day, look at that as something that nobody's been able to top.
If Montanans could put together another project of sorts, and I'm not going to describe what project that might be, would this be something that we could, that Montana would benefit from on a national basis?
Well, I think so. The uniqueness of the Centennial train is something I don't know whether it could happen again or not because of the change in the railroad complexities and the change of travel. I think that that sort of a thing probably could never be recreated, but there must be other ideas out there that should be used and utilized to bring about the celebration because it's so meaningful to the state. So I'm sure there's another project out there that could be used, but at the same time I don't quite think it could ever equal the Centennial train.
Kitty Quigley got up, and it was kind of our farewell deal in Minneapolis. And then we were coming home. And she had them all crying. They're all crying because the trip was over.